The barn had long forgotten what warmth felt like. Its wooden walls groaned under the weight of winter, old beams stiff with frost. The air smelled of damp hay, dust, and something hollow, like a place that had been left behind for too long. Moonlight slipped through the narrow gaps between boards, spilling pale ribbons onto the frozen ground. Somewhere beyond the fields, the town glowed faintly, distant lights scattered like dying stars. Evan Miller sat on an overturned crate in the far corner of the barn, elbows resting on his knees, his hands hanging loosely between them. Each breath formed a slow cloud in the freezing air. He stared at nothing. Or maybe he stared at everything he had lost. Beside him, wrapped in an oversized coat that had once belonged to her mother, sat his daughter, Lily. She was only 6 years old, too small to hold so much silence. The little girl's boots didn't quite touch the dirt floor. Her legs swung gently back and forth, in a rhythm that matched the slow beating of her tired heart. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her eyes, once bright and full of mischief, had dulled into something that made Evan's chest ache. She hadn't smiled in days. "Papa?" she whispered. Her voice barely disturbed the quiet air. "Yes, sweetheart. Is Mommy cold too?" The words hit him harder than the wind ever could. His jaw tightened. He stared at the floor, trying to fight the images that clawed their way into his mind. The hospital room, the beeping machines, the doctor's tired eyes. The moment his world cracked open and spilled out onto cold tile. "No," he said softly. "She's somewhere warm now." Lily nodded as if she understood, but Evan knew she didn't. How could she? How could anyone truly understand loss when they were so small? And yet, it seemed like she understood more than he wished she did. A weak gust of wind slithered through the barn, and Lily shivered. Evan slipped off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She leaned into him instinctively, resting her head against his arm, seeking comfort that he no longer knew how to give. "I'm hungry," she murmured. Guilt twisted in his chest. He reached into the pocket of his worn jeans and pulled out a small piece of bread wrapped in a napkin. It was dry and rough around the edges. "That's all we have right now, Bug," he said. She took it without complaint. No questions, no pouting, just quiet acceptance. That scared him more than anything. Outside, wind swept across the open fields, carrying the faint echo of laughter from the town far beyond the hill. Christmas lights shimmered in colored blurs. Somewhere families were gathering around dinner tables. Somewhere children were tearing open gifts. Somewhere love was filling warm rooms. Here, in this forgotten corner of the world, Evan and Lily sat in silence. He had sent the hired hands home early that morning. "Go to your families," he'd told them. "I'll handle the rest." They hadn't questioned it. He hadn't wanted to be in the house tonight. The house where the walls still echoed with his wife's laughter. The kitchen that still seemed to hum with her presence. The bedroom that felt like a grave. It was easier to be in the barn, with the animals, where nothing expected him to feel anything at all. Just survive. He stared down at Lily. She chewed slowly, then leaned her head back to look up at him. "Do you think she can see us right now?" His throat burned. He closed his eyes. "I hope so. I wish she'd send a sign," Lily said quietly. "Something so I know she's okay." The cold snapped harder at his hands. He pulled her closer. "She is okay, honey. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere better." The words tasted like lies, even though he wanted them to be true. For a long time they simply sat there, listening to the faint rustle of restless animals, the distant sound of wind dragging across frozen land, and the quiet ticking of time moving forward without permission. Then, footsteps, crunching on snow. Evan's body tensed, hand instinctively moving toward the old rifle leaning against the wall. His gaze snapped to the barn door. A shadow stepped into the doorway. Small, feminine. A woman stood there wrapped in a thick coat, a knitted scarf covering half her face, snow clinging to her dark hair. In her hands she carried a large basket. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to startle you." He lowered his hand slowly. "It's all right," he replied. "Can I help you?" Her eyes flicked down to Lily, then back to him. They were soft, kind eyes, the kind that looked like they'd already seen too much of the world. "I'm Clara Evans," she said gently. "I work down at the diner on Main Street." Recognition flickered. He'd seen her a handful of times. Everyone in town had. Some spoke of her kindly. Others avoided her like she carried trouble in her shadow. She was known as the woman who smiled despite what the world had done to her. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. She hesitated, almost embarrassed. "I noticed your lights were off," she said. "And I saw your truck by the barn. I figured, well, Christmas Eve isn't meant to be spent alone." She stepped forward slowly and set the basket on a nearby barrel. "I brought dinner. I made extra at the diner. I didn't want it going to waste." The moment she lifted the cloth, the aroma filled the barn like something holy. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, warm rolls, a small jar of gravy, and tucked to the side, a slice of apple pie. Lily gasped. Her fingers curled instinctively around the edge of Evan's sleeve. "That's for us?" she asked in a tiny, hopeful voice. Clara smiled, and it was like watching sunlight break through storm clouds. "Yes, sweetheart, every bit of it." Evan stood, shame creeping into his bones. "We can't take that," he said quickly. "You don't even really know us." "I know enough," she replied simply. "A little girl shouldn't eat dry bread on Christmas Eve." Her words were not cruel. They were true. And somehow that made them heavier. Lily looked up at him, eyes wide, waiting for his permission. He swallowed the lump in his throat. "It's okay, Lily, you can have some." She whispered a tiny, "Thank you," and practically vibrated with excitement. As Clara began placing food onto a makeshift plate, Clara moved like she had done this 1,000 times. Careful, considerate, gentle. Her fingers were worn from work, but they moved with warmth. She handed Lily the first plate, then looked over at Evan. "You too, Mr. Miller," he said. "Evan Miller." "Well, Mr. Miller," she said softly, "you don't get to sit there starving either." Something about the way she said it made it impossible to argue. He sat back down beside Lily as they ate together in the dim light of a small lantern. The barn, once frozen and lifeless, now felt somehow warmer. Lily was talking. Actually talking. She told Clara about the horse she liked best, about the stray cat that came by the back porch in summer, about the way her mother used to sing to her before bed. Clara listened to every word as if it was the most important story in the world. Evan watched quietly, his chest tightening at the transformation happening right in front of him. This woman didn't know it yet, but she had just breathed life back into his child. "You're a very good storyteller, Lily," Clara said with a gentle laugh. "And you're a very good cooker," Lily replied proudly. Clara chuckled, and the sound echoed softly in the barn. For the first time in a long while, Evan felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. After Lily finished eating, her eyes began to droop. The heaviness of warmth and comfort pulled her closer to sleep. Without thinking, Clara pulled her into her arms, wrapping her in the edge of her coat. Lily curled against her, peaceful, safe. Evan stared, stunned by how natural it looked, as if his daughter had always belonged in her arms. "She's exhausted," Clara whispered. "It's been a hard year," he replied. "I can see that." A long silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just quiet. "I lost my husband 3 years ago," Clara said suddenly, barely above a whisper. "Car accident. Drunk driver." Evan looked at her in surprise. "Everyone in town knows," she continued, distant. "They just pretend not to look at me. Like grief might be contagious." He nodded slowly. "My wife, cancer. It happened so fast I didn't even understand it." Their eyes met for the first time in true understanding. Two broken souls recognizing each other in the dark. "You're not as alone as you think, Mr. Miller," she said. The words settled into him deeper than anything else had. Outside, snow began falling again, silent and soft. And there, in that forgotten barn, on a night meant for miracles, something invisible began to take root. Something warm, something dangerous, something that might just save them all. The morning came quietly, like it was afraid to wake the world. A pale sun crept over the frosted hills, painting the snow in soft shades of silver and gold. The air was still bitter, but something inside the house had shifted. Evan noticed it the moment he stepped through his front door with Lily bundled in his arms. The house didn't feel as empty as it had the night before. The faint scent of roasted chicken and apple pie still lingered in the kitchen, mixing with the familiar smell of old wood and fading memories. Clara had left the remaining food neatly wrapped on the table before she'd gone, along with a small folded napkin that read in neat handwriting, Merry Christmas, Lily. Be good to your papa. Clara. Lily kept the napkin. She tucked it carefully under her pillow like a treasure. Do you think she's awake now? She asked, peeking up at him as he poured water into a chipped mug. Probably, he replied. Can we go see her? Evan froze. The thought startled him, but it wasn't unwelcome. She works a lot, honey. We shouldn't bother her too much. But she wasn't bothered yesterday, Lily insisted. She looked happy. The word happy hung in the air, fragile and rare. Evan studied his daughter's face. There was color in her cheeks again. Curiosity in her eyes. Life. We'll see, he said gently. Let's finish our chores first. But even as he spoke the words, something tugged at him. A pull he hadn't felt in a very long time. Through the morning, Lily hummed to herself as they moved through the day's tasks. She fed the chickens, talked to the horses, and every few minutes she would suddenly glance up and ask, "When can we see Miss Clara again?" Each time a quiet warmth spread through his chest. That afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, there was a soft knocking on the door. Evan stiffened. It had been months since anyone had knocked on that door for anything other than business or sympathy. He opened it, and there she stood. Clara? She wore a simple blue coat with worn buttons, her hair tucked into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. She held a brown paper bag in her hands and looked almost shy. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate to stop by, she said. But Lily left her scarf in the barn last night. And well, I might have also brought cookies. Before Evan could even reply, Lily burst past him. Miss Clara! She practically threw herself at the woman, wrapping her tiny arms around her legs. Clara laughed softly, surprised but clearly touched. Well, I'll take that as a welcome, she said, kneeling to hug her back. Evan felt something in his chest twist painfully. She didn't stop talking about you all morning, he admitted. That's a dangerous reputation to give a woman, Clara joked lightly. Standing again. He stepped aside. You'd better come in then. She did. And somehow the house warmed instantly just because she had entered it. She placed the bag of cookies on the counter and began looking around, her eyes gentle and respectful. She didn't comment on the faded photo frames or the untouched corners. She simply noticed things, like she was mapping the heart of the home. This place is beautiful, she said quietly. It just needs to remember that it's alive. He didn't know how to respond to that. Lily tugged her hand. Can you stay for a little while? Clara looked to Evan, silently asking permission. If you don't have somewhere else to be, he replied. I don't, she said. Not really. They spent the next hour at the kitchen table. Lily colored on scrap paper while Clara helped her draw a crooked little farm. Evan watched as Clara leaned close, correcting her grip on the pencil, praising every attempt, never once showing impatience. She was so gentle, so natural. You're very good with her, he said quietly. She's easy to love, Clara replied. The words hit him harder than anything else ever had. He stepped outside into the crisp air, trying to breathe through the strange blend of gratitude and guilt burning inside him. When he came back inside, Lily had climbed onto Clara's lap, her thumb brushing sleepily across her rough but comforting sleeve. She usually only does that with her mother, he said under his breath. Clara shifted slightly, careful not to wake her. Kids know when they're safe. Silence filled the room, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like something blooming. Over the next week, Clara came often, sometimes with fresh bread, sometimes with stories from the diner, sometimes with nothing more than her presence. And that was always enough. She helped Lily wash her hair in the kitchen sink. She taught her how to knead dough. She sang old songs under her breath while she worked, melodies soft and familiar enough to blur the lines between past and present. Evan found himself watching her more than he should. The way her eyes softened when Lily laughed, the way she held herself, as if she had learned to survive storms alone, the silent strength in every small gesture. You're staring, she teased one afternoon without looking up. He blinked, caught. Sorry. Don't be, she said quietly. No one's looked at me like that in a long time. That night, after she left, Lily lay in bed whispering into the darkness. Papa? Yes, sweetheart. I like her. So do I. She feels like home. The words sank deep into him. Home. He stared at the ceiling long after Lily drifted to sleep, wondering how that was even possible. wondering if what he was feeling was real, or simply the ache of loneliness wrapping itself around a kind soul. A week later, the town began to notice. Whispers started again. Quiet looks. Raised eyebrows at the diner when someone mentioned her name, and his. He heard it at the feed store. The widower's got himself a diner girl now. Poor man's clearly lost his senses. She moves fast for a woman who claims she's grieving. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He told himself their opinions meant nothing. But slowly, doubt began to creep in. What was he really doing? Was he disrespecting the memory of Lily's mother? Was he confusing kindness with love? Was he being selfish? One evening, Clara found him in the barn, sitting where they'd shared Christmas dinner. "You've gone quiet," she said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how the town sees you." "Let them look," she replied. "They don't get to decide who I am. And what if they use it against Lily?" That was the moment her expression shifted. Pain glimmered in her eyes, but she hid it quickly. "I would never want to be the reason her world gets darker again," she murmured. A silence stretched between them. Then she stepped back. "Maybe it would be better if I gave you some space." Panic or fear, he wasn't sure which, seized him. "That's not what I meant." She forced a small smile. "But it is what might be best." And before he could stop her, she walked away. He watched her disappear into the fading light. And for the first time since his wife died, he realized he was about to lose another woman who mattered. And this time, it was by his own hand. The days after Clara stopped coming felt heavier than the winter itself. Even the snow seemed reluctant to fall, as if the sky too had lost its will. The land lay still beneath a thin crust of ice, brittle and silent. The house, once stirred back to life by her laughter and quiet presence, slipped back into a familiar emptiness. But now the emptiness was worse, because Evan knew what it had felt like to have light in those dark rooms, and he had been the one to snuff it out. Lily noticed it first. She stopped humming, stopped lining up her little toys along the windowsill as if waiting for Clara to return and comment on them. She began dragging her old blanket from room to room, curling into corners. At night, she clutched Clara's forgotten scarf to her chest and cried silently into the fabric. "Did she leave because of me?" she finally asked one night. Evan sat on the edge of her bed, muscles rigid. "No, never because of you." "Then why isn't she coming back?" He searched for words that wouldn't break her heart anymore. Then it was already breaking. "Because I got scared," he admitted quietly. "And when grown men get scared, they sometimes do very foolish things." Lily sat up, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Then why don't you fix it?" The simplicity of her words cut through him like glass. He had no answer. All he had were images of Clara's face the moment she stepped away from him. Pain she refused to show, strength she forced into silence. He had chosen fear over faith. And now his little girl paid the price. That guilt became a weight he carried everywhere. In the barn, in the kitchen, in his sleep. It haunted him through restless nights and long, bitter mornings. He tried going back to the diner. Just to see her, just to explain. But every time he neared the front door, he found himself stopping short, watching through the window as she moved between tables, smiling at strangers, pretending everything was fine. He knew that smile. It was the one she used when she wanted the world to leave her alone. And still, he couldn't gather the courage to enter. Then came New Year's Eve, the last day on the calendar, marking hands that had already let go. Snow covered the fields in unbroken white. The sky hung low and heavy, pressing down on the world like a silent burden. Lily barely touched her dinner, pushing her peas into tiny piles as tears welled again in her eyes. "Everyone else gets to start a new year happy," she whispered. "But we don't." The words shattered him. He stood so abruptly his chair scraped loudly across the floor. "No," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "That's not how this is going to end." Lily looked up, startled. "We're not ending another year this way," he continued, grabbing his coat. "And we're not starting the next one in silence either." Her eyes widened. "What are we doing?" "We're going to fix my mistake." He knelt in front of her, gripping her small hands. "I was wrong, Lily. People don't get to choose who belongs in our lives. Fear doesn't get to run this house anymore." A slow, hopeful smile crept across her face. "Does that mean we're going to see her?" "Yes," he said, swallowing hard. It means I'm going to beg for forgiveness if I have to." He didn't wait for doubt to catch up to him. Within minutes, they were bundled up and walking toward town through the dim evening light. The world was quiet, almost holding its breath. Fireworks cracked faintly in the distance, but Evan heard nothing except the pounding of his own heart. When they reached the diner, warm lights glowed in the frosted windows. He hesitated only for a second. Then he pushed the door open. A bell rang. Several people turned in surprise as a man and child stepped inside together. The warmth from the stoves mixed with the smell of sugar and coffee and something sweet almost forgotten. Clara stood behind the counter. Her back stiffened when she felt someone enter. Slowly she turned. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat the entire world paused. "Evan," she whispered. He stepped forward. "I came to say everything I was too afraid to say before." Lily moved to Clara, reaching for her hand. Clara didn't pull away this time. She simply held on, as if she'd been waiting. "I was so focused on what other people thought," he continued, voice rough. "On being judged. On not dishonoring a memory. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only thing that truly matters is the people who make our lives better." Her eyes shimmered. "You didn't just bring food to my barn, Clara," he said. "You brought my daughter back to life. You brought laughter into a house that had only known grief. You reminded me what it feels like to be human again." The diner had gone completely silent now. Every soul inside was listening. "I tried to push you away because I was afraid of love. But the truth is, I was already falling for you the moment you walked in on Christmas Eve." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "And I'm done being afraid." He took a step closer. "If you're willing to forgive a stubborn, broken man, I want you in our lives. Not as a visitor, not as a distant memory, but as family." The word hung between them. Silence. Then Lily spoke. "Please don't leave us again." Clara sank to her knees, embracing her tightly. "I never wanted to," she whispered into her hair. "I just didn't think you needed me." Evan knelt beside them, joining the embrace. "We need you," he said. "Every day. For the rest of our lives, if you'll have us." Clara pulled back, her hands trembling as they found his. "You're asking for more than just forgiveness," she said softly. "I'm asking for a future," he replied. "For a home that sounds like laughter again. For a life that doesn't feel so cold." "You're asking me to be her mother," she whispered, looking at Lily. "And my wife," he added. The room gasped collectively. Clara stared at him, trying to read his soul. Then slowly, a smile bloomed through her tears. "Yes," the single word dropped like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Yes, Evan, I will." Lily burst into laughter, clinging to both of them at once. "You're really staying?" she cried. "I'm really staying," Clara promised. "No matter who tries to stop me." He pulled Clara into his arms, his forehead resting against hers. "I should have chosen you the first moment you walked into that barn," he whispered. "But you're choosing me now," she replied. "Forever." Outside, fireworks lit the sky as the new year began. Inside, a broken family had just been made whole again. And for the first time in a very long time, Evan Miller truly believed in beginnings. The air on the ride back to the ranch felt different. Lighter, as if every breath Evan took no longer scraped against frozen memories, but moved freely, full and warm. Clara rode beside them, the night wind tugging at loose strands of her hair. Lily sat between them on Evan's coat, too excited to even be cold, her voice tumbling out in endless streams of happy questions. "Are you really going to live with us? Can you help me bake bread every day? Can I call you Mama, or is that too much right now? Do you think Mommy will be mad?" Clara answered each one patiently, her hand brushing Lily's hair in a way that was both gentle and certain. "She won't be mad," she said softly. "She just wants you safe, and loved, and happy." Evan heard the unspoken truth in her words, that this wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about continuing what had been broken, about growing around loss instead of living inside it. When they reached the house, the wooden porch creaked under their footsteps, a familiar sound that now felt like a welcome home. Clara paused at the doorway, suddenly quiet. "You don't have to cross this threshold unless you're sure," he said, tightening his fingers around hers. "Once you walk in, this becomes yours too." She looked at the house, the worn wood, the old windows, the life that had once lived there, and the new life promising to begin. "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied, and then she stepped inside. Something invisible shifted, as if the house itself released a long breath it had been holding for years. That night, Lily refused to sleep alone. So the three of them sat on the couch beneath a patchwork quilt, Clara on one side, Evan on the other, Lily tucked in the middle like she had always belonged there. Clara told her stories from her childhood. Evan spoke of Lily's mother, her laugh, her kindness, the way she danced in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. They spoke of her with tenderness, not with pain. And in that moment, Evan knew something sacred had been healed. Weeks passed, but instead of fading, the warmth only grew. Clara slowly breathed life back into the little house. She hung curtains in the windows to soften the light. She planted seeds in the stubborn frozen ground, whispering to the soil as if it could hear her promises of spring. She filled the kitchen with the aroma of fresh bread and simmering soups. The walls no longer echoed with silence. They learned a new sound: laughter. At first the town watched with judgment, then with curiosity, then finally, acceptance. Women who had once whispered now began to smile when Clara walked by. A neighbor left a basket of eggs at their door one morning without a word. The same butcher who had once been cold now called her ma'am with respect. Kindness had changed the story. On a quiet Sunday in March, with the ground beginning to thaw, Evan stood with Clara at the edge of their fields, her fingers wrapped in his. "There's something else I need to ask you," he said softly. She looked up at him, uncertain warmth in her eyes. "What now, Mr. Miller?" "You already asked for the biggest thing a woman could ever give." He smiled gently. "Then let me ask for it the right way." He lowered himself down onto one knee, right there in the dirt and melting snow. Lily gasped from the porch. Clara's hands flew to her mouth. "I asked you in desperation before," he continued, "in fear of losing you. Today I'm asking you because I want a lifetime." In the calm, not the chaos, he pulled a simple silver ring from his pocket. Nothing fancy, but it glowed like it carried every hope he had left. "Clara Evans, will you marry me? Will you become Lily's mother in every way that matters and my partner for as long as God allows?" Tears spilled free now. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." Lily came running across the yard, throwing her little arms around them both as laughter and tears tangled together. They were married 2 weeks later beneath the old oak tree behind the house. No grand ceremony, no crowd of strangers, just a handful of friends, the open sky, the quiet breeze whispering through new leaves, Lily standing between them, holding both of their hands as if she were tying them together herself. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Those words didn't echo through a large church. They settled into the earth, into the walls of the home, into the hearts of 3 people who had found each other through brokenness. Later that evening, as the sun bled orange and gold across the horizon, Clara rested her head on Evan's shoulder on the porch swing. "I never thought life could be so full again," she whispered. He kissed the top of her hair gently. "I forgot what living felt like until you walked into that barn with a Christmas dinner and a brave heart." She smiled. "And look how far one small act of kindness brought us." In the yard, Lily laughed as she chased fireflies, her tiny hands reaching up for glowing light. A few months later, Clara sat at the kitchen table, her hand resting over the soft curve of her belly. Evan stared at her, stunned and overwhelmed all over again. "You're sure?" he breathed. She nodded, eyes shining. "We're going to have another little miracle in this house." He dropped to his knees beside her chair, tears blurring his vision as he pressed his face against her stomach. "After everything we lost, God is actually giving us more." Lily climbed beside him, pressing her ear to Clara's belly. "I'm going to teach the baby how to be brave," she whispered, and Evan smiled, knowing that was exactly what this family had learned to be. Brave enough to love again, strong enough to open their hearts, bold enough to believe in second chances. On one quiet evening, as dusk kissed the fields and the first stars blinked alive, Evan stood at the doorway of the barn, the same barn where everything had once been lost, and later found again. The old crate still sat in the corner, the same place he had held his grief. Now, tucked neatly on a nail by the entrance, hung Clara's scarf, a symbol of warmth on the coldest night of his life. He looked across the land, at his wife humming softly inside, at his daughter laughing in the distance, at the future growing beneath Clara's heart, and with a grateful breath, he finally understood something simple and true. Love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or fanfare. Sometimes, it walks quietly into a cold, broken barn, carrying a warm meal, and changes everything.